Hi class, so we are going to begin sewing our skirt. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to sew our darts on the wrong side of the fabric. So the way you do this is you fold your skirt in half, making sure that the line that you drew for your darts are touching each other on the front and the back where you drew the dart. You also want to make sure that you drew that line on the wrong side of your fabric. So we'll start by making sure we backstitch the top of the skirt so that we tack that stitch down, and then we'll sew on that line all the way down, making sure we also backstitch when we get to the end of the dart. Once this is done, clip it and sew the other side of your back skirt. Make sure you cut off all the loose threads as close to the fabric as possible because we want a neat dart. And also when you're doing this, you want to always make sure that you are doing the correct thing. And you do that by making sure that your center backs are facing each other before you start sewing the darts, so that you make sure that you sew the darts on opposite sides of the skirt and you don't accidentally sew. An example would be the right side of the skirt twice. Okay, so once you've done that, the next thing we're going to do is sew the center back together. Remember that the center back seam is 1 inch. Now, the way we're going to sew this, we're going to use 2 different stitch lengths. We're going to start the top half of the stitch being a loose stitch, which is basically a number 5. We call this a basting stitch. And then once we get to the double notch that lets us know we've hit the hip, we're going to switch our stitch to a regular 2.5 or 3 millimeter stitch. You do not need to backstitch at the top of the skirt because we will be taking that stitch out. Now I'm getting close to my my hip, and since I've gotten to my hip, I make sure I did a double stitch after I changed the length of my stitch, and then also a back stitch when I got to the end. So notice that the stitch at the top is loose, and then after my double notch for the hip, I did a regular stitch and also made sure I backstitch. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to press the seam open so that we can sew our zipper. Once you press the seam open, you're going to make sure you also press the darts folded towards the center back. Once this is done, grab your zipper and make sure you align it to the center back. So what we want is the bumpy side of your zipper. We want that facing your fabric. And we also want to make sure that our zipper is extended past the hip notch, which is the double notch at the back. We'll pin that in place so that when we go to sew it on the machine, the fabric doesn't move around too much and we know what we're going to do. We have a clear vision for our zipper. So now with my zipper open, I am going to basically align my center foot to be in the center of the zipper tape, making sure that it doesn't go over the edge of the zipper or the zipper stopper, the zipper teeth stopper, which is the metal bit at the end of the tape. And I'm going to sew, making sure I backstitch, and then I'm going to attach my zipper down. Another thing you want to be aware of is that my zipper teeth opened is aligned to my center back seam. Once I get to the end of where my zipper is going to be, making sure that my needle is in my fabric, I am going to now lift up my presser foot. So you want to make sure that your needle is inside your fabric, and then you can lift up your presser foot and then drag, like basically close your zipper. This is a little bit tight and tricky, but just take your time. Once you've closed your zipper, you can go back and put your zipper foot down and continue stitching, making sure or trying your best to make sure that the center of your zipper is aligned to your center back seam. Once you get to the end where your notch is, you're going to make sure your needle is still in your fabric, and then you lift up your presser foot and pivot your fabric so that you can go across your zipper to the other side, like you're crossing the road. Same thing when you're done stitching to the center of the other side of your zipper tape, making sure your needle is stuck in the fabric. You lift up your presser foot and pivot the fabric. And now I'm going to stitch all the way up. When I get to what would be the end and I know I can't sew to the top of my zipper, I'm going to stop stitching, do a quick back stitch, and now I am going to open my center back. Remember, I did a very loose stitch, so it should be easy for me to basically seam rip that seam open. You want to make sure you take your time. And slowly undo the stitch in the center back up until the end of your stitch for your zipper. Once you're done, take out your loose threads, and then we're going to go back to the stitch that we did not finish. We're basically going to open our zipper and then go back to the stitch that we did not finish on the zipper and stitch up the rest. Once that's done, we're now going to sew our side seams together. So your back is going to be bigger than your front. Remember, we subtracted 1 inch from the front and added it to the back. So please expect your back to be wider than your front. So making sure your hip notches match, that's the first thing we're going to pin together. We're going to pin our side seam, our front side seam, to our back side seam at the hip. And then at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, we are going to sew our skirt together. Please make sure that your stitch length is at a 2 or 3 and you are sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember to back stitch at the top, and you will also back stitch at the hem. When you get to your pinned area, feel free to take off your pin or take out your pin before you sew. Sometimes that can mess up your machine. If you have the confidence to sew through the pin, feel free. It doesn't always mess up the machine, but don't feel funny about taking your pin off. You're more than welcome to. So you sew the first side and go ahead and sew the second side. Once you're done, please go ahead and press your side seam open. Now it can be kind of tricky sewing your side seam, pressing your side seam on the board, because you might press the other side and put wrinkles in it. So what I like to do is actually pull my skirt through the board. So it's almost like a circle or a band wrapping a band around your ironing board and then pressing that way. If you can't, that's also fine. Just make sure you do not use steam until you are sure the seam is how you want it to be pressed, and then you can use some steam. Once you're done with the skirt, we're going to move on to the facing, and we're going to sew the side seams of the facing together. Then go ahead and press your side seam open just like you pressed your skirt seam open. And then making sure that the right side of your fabric, by right side of your fabric, I mean the side that doesn't have the seam is hidden. So you're going to take the right side of the fabric that doesn't have the seam showing and make sure that you align that to your skirt. So we'll start with our side seams. So making sure that the side that has a clean edge is aligned to the skirt. Actually, we started with the center back. Okay, so and also the side seam. So making sure that the side that has the seam is on the outside and the clean side is on the inside, literally touching each other. So you can see side seam to side seam. We are going to pin them together. So start with your center back. Make sure that your center back notch is aligned to your center back seam, and then your side seams are aligned to each other. Making sure that your center front notch is aligned to your center front notch. And then you do the same thing to the other side seam and the other center back. Once you're done, we are going to sew our waist seam, attaching the facing to the skirt at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, because that is what is on our pattern. Make sure that your dart is folded towards the center back. And we're going to sew all the way around. Once we're done with this, we are going to take this skirt to the presser once again, the ironing board, and then we are going to press our facing, or the seam, sorry, towards the facing. So that means the entire seam is going to be pressed facing the facing, towards the facing. This is a bulkier seam, so I make sure to take off my pins because that's more work from the machine. So now that my facing is pressed to, my seam is pressed towards my facing. If you notice, the facing seam's folded. We're going to stitch a seam that's next to our the seam that we used to attach our facing to our skirt. And the reason why we do this is because it helps to hold the facing on the inside and allows us to have a clean seam at the waist. If not, if we do not do this, our facing will keep being untucked and coming out of our skirt, and that will not look cute when we wear it. So that is why we do an understitch. It helps the seam to lay down. It's kind of like pressing it permanently. And so I'm going to start at the center back, and I'm going to go all the way around the skirt till I hit the other center back. Once you backstitch, the next thing we're going to do is we are going to fold. So notice we have like a 1 inch overlap. So we're going to fold that into the facing and then fold the facing down to the skirt. And now on the other side, we are going to directly going above the stitch that we used to attach our zipper to our skirt. We are going to stitch the facing down. Pins make the world go round, so make sure you pin it in place so it doesn't dance around. And now going over the stitch that we used for the zipper, we are going to stitch our facing down, and we are literally almost done. After this, we have one more major stitch, and that is the hem, and we're done. Make sure you do this to both sides of your skirt. So now that we've made sure that we've attached our facing to our skirt to have a nice clean zipper, we're going to fold our hem at the hem notch. We're going to fold our skirt at the hem notch. We'll start with the side seam, do the center back, and then do the center front. So pinning it in 4 places, making sure that our fabric is folded 1.5 inches because that's what we used for our hem. And then we are going to stitch it down. So to get the right seam for my hem, I'm just going to make sure that my presser foot for my pen, my presser foot for my zipper, my presser foot is aligned to the folded, not the folded edge, but the side that the fabric is on the inside. I do not know how to say this properly, but as illustrated in the video. And basically we're done. Making sure that your presser foot is aligned to the edge of the fabric that's folded in. I think that's a good way to say this. But basically we're done with our skirt. I hope you guys enjoyed making this and this was as easy as it seemed in the video. Bye! Make sure you press your skirt. Okay, bye.